So here we are today. I'm here. My name is Nellie Wosu. I am the author of The Keeper of Me, and I'm here today with my fellow colleague and author, Mr. Terry Alston.
That's right.
And we're here looking at his upcoming work, which is very, very interesting. Terry has told me much about this work. He has a working title. Terry, what is that working title?
Flip flops, socks, and white V-neck T-shirts.
Flip flops, socks, and white v-neck t-shirts.
That's right.
Okay. That's rather interesting. Is it about athleticism?
Quite the contrary. And you still have a white V-neck T-shirt on now.
Yes.
Uh, I guess to make a long story short, I had kind of decided that when I finished the book, I would finished it completely. I would name it. But I have had this working title for some time, and it came about when I had and I call it an inner body experience is what I had, and it just changed my life completely. After that happened, some of the things that were important to me before were no longer important. As far as some of the material things, and so I went to the store and bought a bunch of white V-neck T-shirts and a bunch of footies and flip-flops, and I started working out every day. I changed and I talk about that in my book, how I changed my health consciousness. And so it got to the point where I was wearing these flip-flops and socks and white V-neck T-shirts every day, no matter where I went,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was to the gym or outside of the gym. A next door neighbor commented one day, kind of looked at me like, why do you wear that? That's all you wear. I think it looks kind of stupid, is what she told me. And it didn't bother me at all. But at that moment, I realized that I had already discovered that I'm not who I wear anyway. That I had already discovered that I'm the spirit that lives within this shell. And so I felt like if you look at me and you see my clothing and that has value, then you need to take a look at yourself. So I had, through my inner body experience, I had evolved to a person who was no longer interested in material items, and I understood that I was more than just what's on the surface. So that's kind of where that title comes.
Okay, so inner body experience. When people talk a lot about outer body experiences, but you had an inner body experience. Do you care to tell me what is an inner body experience
I think,
for you?
yeah, I want to coin that phrase back.
Me, I think maybe an inner body experience. What
Yeah.
is that, Terry? What was that for you?
Well,
Or what is it for you?
okay, for me, and I describe this in detail in the book, and it's quite interesting when as the audience, when you read that, you'll see. But just briefly, I had gone through a very severe depression. I was on my third marriage, and we split up, and had moved back home with my parents, and I didn't even leave the house for a couple of months. I mean, I was in bed for 3 or 4 weeks without even coming out of my room. And I was just really depressed, and had gotten a hotel room and had contemplated suicide. I didn't go through with it, but when I finally came back to reality, so to speak, I uh, that kind of got smoothed out a little bit, and so shortly after that, I was laying in bed one Sunday morning, and that's when it happened. That's when this inner body experience happened. I mean, I lost. I felt like I can just kind of talk about what it felt like because I'm not sure exactly what happened. But as I lay there, I felt as if I were no longer in my body. As far as mentally, I felt that I wasn't attached to myself. I felt sort of unconscious. I didn't know what was going on for a period of time, and while I was not conscious of what was going on, um, I do remember feeling things I had never felt. I felt a kind of love sensation that I had never felt in my life. It was just an amazing feeling, and I'm not going to go into detail now, but in the book I explain it in detail exactly what happened in that moment. And when I came back to, so to speak, I was a different person. I knew immediately. So I call it an inner body experience because between that time and even now, what I've learned from some of what happened to me and who I am now even is the brilliance of the spirit in the body,
Mm-hmm.
and I've learned to understand and become in touch with the spirit inside of me. And so I feel like in that moment, I didn't actually nothing actually left the shell, but I feel like inside the shell, the spirit got bright.
It elevated, to so to speak, that you were heightened, perhaps. Your
Absolutely.
your awareness
My
of.
aware, absolutely, my awareness was heightened, and I just feel like everything that I experienced took place within this shell. An awakening of my consciousness, an awakening of just so many things in my spirit, which was already there, but it was like my flesh was minimized and my spirit grew in that moment. And so whether outer body or inner body, I will refer to it. Like I said, I'm gonna trademark that now as
Okay, okay.
an inner body experience.
Because it was something that you felt within.
It was something that I felt. Period. And I just feel like from what I feel, it was such a spiritual. Uh,
Resurgence.
it was a spiritual resurgence, and it was my spirit, and so it all happened inside me. I think my flesh was allowed, my mind, my flesh was allowed to experience that changing of what was happening on the inside, of that resurgence, of that regeneration of what was happening on the inside.
All right. And was there a time period that this happened in? Was it moments, or was it an hour or 2 hours, or
Wow.
was it? Can you even begin to define it in time
You know what? I couldn't define it in time mentally, as far as physically looking.
chronologically looking
I
at?
never really looked at a clock or never was aware of what time is it now and what time
Uh huh.
it was over. It felt like it was 5 minutes.
Felt
It
like five
felt like
minutes.
5 minutes. But I'm not sure because even when it was over, I remember when it was over, I immediately uh, I have a Bible on my nightstand. And I've talked to you. I don't know why, because I was not a religious person.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
kind of like a piece of furniture, the
Yes.
Bible sitting there. But I remember opening the Bible and flipping through it and just looking at parables and reading these parables and just smiling as I had this understanding of these of the text I hadn't had before. So uh, I'm not sure of how long this actually lasted, but just it actually seemed it was a quick moment. It seemed, but it
Okay.
yeah.
And what year was this when all of this occurred?
Wow, that would have been about 2010.
Okay, so about 3 years ago or
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so from that moment on,
2010, maybe 11 even.
okay, so 2 or 3 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah, yeah.
and your life has altered greatly
Mhm.
since then.
Mhm.
I remember you saying.
Yes.
So let me ask you, what do you, this work that you're doing, how did you come about embarking on this work, this flip flops, socks,
The white
and
V-neck
white
t-shirts.
V-neck? How did you come about putting the pen to the paper, or the fingers to the keyboard? How did you come about all of this?
That's a great question. I never considered myself a writer. It was something that I had never really gotten into or even thought about. I was led to write this after that incident, after that inner body experience,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after that happened. Um, a day or two later, a lot of changes started taking place. I felt physical changes, and we'll talk about that maybe later. And I mentioned that in the book. Also, just a lot of things changed. I heard voices calling my name, and my awareness was so heightened at the time, and I started receiving um, all these messages inside and when one of the messages was write your story,
Write your
which was
story.
which was unusual to me to hear, because I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. So something inside me said, "Write your story," and uh, and I listened. It was almost as if that what which was speaking to me inside of me was speaking to me and controlling me, and I understood that was what I needed to do.
What you needed to do. Now, let me ask you this, Terry. In that voice, you mentioned prior to that voices, or in that voice, does that voice have a gender, or is it a voice actually voice, or is it intuitive in your inner self? Which one would it be, or is it something
Well,
different?
actually, that's interesting. You know, when this inner body experience took place, shortly after one of the physical things that took place, as I actually heard whispers. There was a whispering in the back of my head that was calling my name.
Mm-hmm.
The messages that I receive, however, aren't voice messages, aren't voices or whisperings. They are more just intuition. You know,
Like you feel led to.
I feel led to, and it's funny to explain because it's like I hear a voice, but it's not a voice. But it's the feeling is so strong, the message is so strong that I'm so drawn to the message to follow the message. And so in writing the book, that was a message. Write your story. I that same day drove to Walmart. I got about 3 big reams of paper, of
Mm-hmm.
notebook paper, and a pack of pens,
Mm-hmm.
and I came back home and I started writing. And that first day, I probably wrote 50 pages just without even blinking. And
Okay.
at that point, I started realizing my writing wasn't even coming from me, and it still doesn't. You
Mm-hmm.
know, as I've written this book, and I've actually got another book that I'm writing at the same time, actually. But these things are writing themselves.
They're writing
Yeah,
themselves.
I always say that that I'm writing it with a co-author. That's God.
Yes.
That's my
Okay.
co-author.
Yes. 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 And he is the inspiration behind these writings.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So, what can you share with us from your book today?
Um,
Do you have a particular point in time? Well, let me just step back for a
okay.
moment, actually. Tell me who Terry Verice Alston is. Tell me a little bit about your background because we've just started getting into the conversation, um, the discourse, if you will. Who are you? Who are you? Where did you come from? How did you get here?
Mm, wow. Let me just, one of the exciting things about writing this memoir is the fact that when you read my book, you'll those questions will be answered. Um, but just to kind of sum up, who am I? Where did I come from? I'm from a small town in the Carolinas, in North Carolina. I grew up in a middle class family. My parents were educators, school teachers. So uh, my brother and I, who he's 17 months older, we grew up in a very strict household, um, uh, a household that emphasized education. So we were required to do well in school, and we did. I was very athletically inclined, and I was very successful in my athletics. Um, just a really nice guy, very naive, very immature actually growing up. Went to college, played sports in college, joined the fraternity. Never really had a lot of friends, even growing up, even in high school. I kind of circulated through different groups of friends. Even high school and college. It was the white boys one time, and then it was the black guys another time, and then it was the hood people another time. So I had so many different outlets, so many different groups of friends. Um, so,
Compartmentalized.
if you will, yeah, okay.
There was no
Um,
inclusion.
No inclusion. What do you mean?
Well, none of the groups of friends, the unique group of friends that you had, they never come together. Or
No,
they were all
no,
separate
no.
and
And it
apart.
was always like that. And I've talked about this before, even in college. After joining a fraternity, all of my fraternity brothers would criticize me because I didn't just hang out with them. I was on the football team as well, so I had friends that played football that I would hang out with from time to time. Uh, just the students who weren't athletes or in Greek organizations. I had a lot of different groups of friends, white and black. I would hang out with those people at different times, and so never did those groups ever come together. But I circulated through out all of those groups.
Mm-hmm.
Never felt close to anybody in any of those groups, though.
Have you isolated yourself, Terry?
You mean present day or back then? I was into the girls, so that was my thing really. Whether I had guy friends or not, one thing about me is I always had a lot of women. So at the end of the day, it didn't matter about the guys. I always had company. Um, Today, I kind of isolate myself. I'm borderline recluse. I work out every day, so I go to the gym. Other than that, I just spend time creating. I do volunteer work,
Mm-hmm.
which is very important to me.
To
Uh,
give back?
to give back. That's something that I've been led to do also. And I don't want to get into the other book, but the other book I talk about, I give 5 ways of having your purpose find you,
Okay.
and opening up meaning in your life. And so, one of the steps of those 5 steps is service. And so, that's become a necessary part of my life, and it
Does
makes
it
me.
enrich your life?
It does. It does. I believe in karma, and I do it because it's what I've been led to do. But I do believe in karma. I believe what you give out, you get back.
Okay.
And so, with that principle in mind, it's another great way or reason why I do like to serve and do for other people.
Well, all right then. So we have a little bit of background about you from your early stages in life, and
And let me and I hate to cut you off, but and I stop. Let me just say, and as you read the book, you see I go through a period of drug addiction as well.
mm-hmm.
That's a big part of my life, and it's some dark places that takes me. Uh, and so I go through 3 marriages, so a lot of dysfunction all through my life. But I come out, and to kind of end it, I come out on the other side uh, with a lot of experience, which especially after I go through this inner body experience, and I'll keep emphasizing
Yes, okay.
this inner body experience. Am I able to sit here with this
Your truth.
with my truth, and that I can share this and be open about it, because I reveal a lot of things in my memoir that a lot of people may uh, have a problem. They might have a problem themselves opening up on that level.
Okay.
But everything that I write is everything that we write, because God's writing this with me, and everything
Mm-hmm.
that we write is for a reason. And
So
so this is an inspiration for people. Is
I was
what
about to say,
what I
so
see.
your writing is inspired. It's the truth that you've lived, the
Absolutely.
truth that you are living,
Hmm.
and the truth that you hope to continue to live, but
Absolutely.
in more inner.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So please share with us today, um, if you will, an excerpt from your book.
Okay.
Okay, we'd like to hear that.
Okay.
Okay.
You know what? I actually I've got this set up right here that I'd like to read, and I think one thing that first of all is inspired me to read this section here, or this little bit, is with the talk of fathers leaving. I know I was
Uh-huh.
watching Oprah Winfrey the other
That's
night, and she
right.
had a special on
Yes, fatherless
fatherless
sons.
sons, right? And
Hmm.
so I grew up in a house that my father was present, but I talk about this in my book, that it would have been better for me for him not to be there, which is contradictory sort of this fatherless son piece. And I think having a father in the home is extremely important if
Hmm.
that father is functioning properly.
As a father.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if he's not, he shouldn't be there. But what I'm saying is I want to challenge all of those, um, all of the talk about a father not being present is such a bad thing. I want to emphasize the fact that both parents need to be loving and caring and and
Nurturing.
nurturing, and even in co-parenting
Hmm.
functionally.
Yes.
I contend that a dysfunctional father. Let me back up and say that for me, a dysfunctional father in my life, because that's who my father was at that time, hurt me more than helped me.
Hmm.
I feel if I had grown up without a father in my life, without my father in my life, then I would have been a different person.
Mm-hmm.
So, my father is deceased now, and I was fortunate enough to be able to mend that before he passed away, years before that.
Yes.
So, I loved him to death, and I always will. He was my hero all my life, and I'm glad we made amends and became best friends. Actually, his last 15 years of life, we were best friends,
That's a very
and
good
and
thing.
that's a great thing. And so, I just want to, like I said, stress the importance of the fathers. If they're going to be in your life, they need to be functioning properly. They need to be loving. They need to be giving the child attention and caring for the child. So that whole
The
talk,
value needs to be added positively.
right,
It should be value added,
right,
not just in supplying
not
material
right,
things, the emotional stability
absolutely.
uh, between relationships. So you've shared with me,
Not just his physical presence.
no,
It's not
right,
enough.
it's
It's not
not
enough.
enough. And even living in a middle class household, I understand from what you're saying that the presence should be one of love and acceptance.
Hmm.
You believe that is much more beneficial than having the material needs taken care of and
Right.
being emotionally distant or
Absolutely.
unavailable.
Absolutely.
So that's what the point that you're trying to
So
stress.
that's what I'm trying to stress, and that's just speaking from my experience. And so as I read this, this was an incident. This incident, this scenario that I'm gonna read quickly here is was a changing point in my life in the relationship with my father. This here made me look at my father differently, and it also made me feel differently about myself,
All right, let's hear it.
negatively. So let's go. Okay, let me put my glasses
Yes, sir.
on. One Saturday during football season, I was no longer playing for the boys' club, but now for a Pop Warner league. This was the step right before playing junior high ball. I was in the sixth grade, and the following year I would be at the middle school or junior high and could then play for the school. I was already good enough to play with the older kids in all of the three sports I played. I was I was still a superstar basketball player. Now, Phil Ford had been my idol for several years. I even wore the number 12 jersey each year. In baseball, I had made the All-Star team each year as the team's starting catcher, and although football was the weakest sport for me of the three, I was still good enough to compete on my level and above. There had even been talk of them letting me play football and basketball for the junior high school, but since that had never been done at my future school, they were reluctant to start it with me. I was playing for a team called the Redskins, and once again, the coach's son and his friends played all the key positions. I knew this would be the last year of this. This being the case, the coach still wanted to win, so he knew deep down that I was the best player on the team. So he had to strategically find a way for his son to look good, but for me to get my hands on the ball. As I take a moment to reflect on this time to relive my story was not easy. The hardest part for me is not the dark life I would eventually become entangled with. It would not be failed relationships one after the other. However, the lack of attention, the lack of support, and the missing friendship I would have with my father. Many times as an adult, his actions would take me back to the remembrance of my childhood and how the dependency on my hero would be all for naught. The deep wanting and desire to have my father as a partner, someone to teach me how to become a man. With him, I needed someone to guide me through my life and make me strong. I eventually figured out and learned to accept and to understand that you can't give what you don't have, or better yet, as I like to say, you can't get blood from a turnip. For me, the relationship we did have died on that Saturday as my team, the Redskins, played an opponent we hadn't beaten before. I had the best football game I had ever played in my life. I scored 3 touchdowns that day. I was unstoppable. Most of my sporting events consisted of me trying to do all I could, not only to win, but hoping that it was, it would excite and ignite my father. That perhaps if I did something truly remarkable, he may notice it and decide to spend more time working with me and making me better. This game was no exception. I had intercepted a pass and ran the ball 50 yards for my first touchdown, caught a 20-yard pass and ran another 30 yards for my second, and took a handoff on a reverse play that netted me 40 yards in my third touchdown of the day. We won the game soundly, and I couldn't wait to see my parents after the game. I knew my dad wasn't going to be able to resist this one. His tough demeanor would have to change on this day. This nonchalant behavior with us had been his trademark, but 3 touchdowns must make him proud. As we walked to the car after the game, I was beaming. Many of the players and parents were complimenting me on how well I played. My dad had yet to make any type remark, good or bad. Now, normally he would pull me aside after games and tell me everything I did wrong. Today, I felt like that would be impossible. I felt I had played flawlessly on the field. Since he had not yet commented, maybe he had not seen the game. Could he have been at the car smoking throughout the entire game? I was uncertain at this point. We got into the car, my mom in the front seat, in the front passenger seat, and me in the back. We were on our way over to pick Hank up from an event he was having at his school. I asked my father excitedly, Daddy, did you see me out there today? Of course I did, he said in a simple tone. How did I play? I yelled. After a slight pause, he said, you did okay. Okay, I thought. Were we at the same game? Yeah, but did you, yeah, but did you see the touchdowns I scored? Terry, I was at the game. Yeah, I know, but what about the interception I caught and ran back? Did you see that? I was so fired up and hyper. I don't remember another time in my sports career when I was more proud or more excited than that moment. I asked him again, Daddy, how did I do? Terry, you were okay. And the way he said it this time just crushed me. I was so hurt. It was like a sharp pain running throughout my body. I went from super excited to a depressive sadness just like that. His tone in answering me was as if I was disturbing him by asking him about my performance. How could he treat me this way? This was the best game of my life and he didn't even care. I sat quietly in the back seat, numb with pain and sadness and disappointment. I decided in that moment I would never ask him anything else about sports. Once again, I hated him. I wished I had another father. I hated myself and I hated my family. I could never have any happiness or peace in this family. I wished in that moment I were dead. I hated everything that day. I sat in the back and although nobody saw my tears, I was crying inside. I wished my father was dead. I wished he was dead. That incident alone was a turning point in my life.
That's very, very, very poignant and very revealing about the shadow side of parenting. Um, was your father an athlete?
You know, he wasn't an athlete, but he was he was a coach. He was a school teacher and coach and one of the best basketball coaches in Charlotte at that time. He was really into sports but had never played.
Mm-hmm. So, when you're reading that today, are you still that little boy?
Not anymore, but I was that little boy for so many years even after that, well into my adult life,
Mm-hmm.
but not anymore, no.
So, did you ever have a discussion with your father about that encounter during the times that you had mended the changes in your life?
Never,
You never
never.
spoke about that again.
Absolutely not. And I say absolutely because um, my family growing up, we it was always the kind of family we never talked about anything that happened. You know, we no matter how bad it was, it got swept under the rug. You know, we weren't the type of family that communicated with one another at all. There were no discussions like that.
Did your mother give you reinforcement for that amazing day?
Never. No,
Not
absolutely
in
not.
that
No.
moment. She never
No, no,
came.
she didn't, and she could have, you know, but her the effects of her not giving me reinforcement did not bother me. I looked, you know, my father being a coach
Mm-hmm.
and being a young boy, I was really, although my mom really raised us, I was attached to my dad. You know,
Yes.
he was this big, strong guy who I admired and I wanted to be like him, like most boys are,
Yes. Yes.
and I feared him at the same time. You know, and but when it came to athletics, he had to be the one for me that gave me that reinforcement. I think whether she said something or not, it wouldn't have affected me one way or the other because I was looking to
You were
him.
looking for him to
Right,
give you
absolutely,
what you needed to have in that
absolutely,
moment, which was
absolutely.
to embrace you, support you, say, son, you did a terrific job, so
Hmm.
on and so
Hmm.
forth. Well, that's just one section that Terry has shared with us, and we're going to be able to come back with Terry again at another point to get into his college life and we'll look at the challenges that grew him as a man. Um, there are many. I've been given a brief synopsis of some of those things Terry has shared with me about those challenges, and they're wonderful and marvelous in the fact that one thing that I've noted from this book and this man telling his story, and I want the readers to know and the listeners to hear that it is going to be a rude awakening that you probably need to have. You may be having young people in your life now, or you may have someone that's an adult that's going through some very similar challenges, or perhaps they are about to enter these challenges. These are things that actually have happened in his life, and they are startling, but they're nothing that hasn't happened to humanity in the past. But the thing about it is relevant today, because one of the things that we believe, I personally believe, is that we need to be cognizant of someone else's reality, the impacts that we have against one another by not opening up to actively share the heart, to let someone know how you really feel about it, or because that's why we have a lot of difficulty in relationships, I believe, that no one is being forthright about how things are happening. And well, for an 11 or 12-year-old boy, it's difficult for him to come up to a father in those days and say, Dad, this is not right. Today's children, they can be more expressive. However, children also are still silent little people, but they do have big feelings. And if you have a young person that's in your life today, we would ask you just for a moment to stop and listen to what they're having to say, even if they've not uttered a single word. Feel their heart and see what it is, because your heart may expand and you may become a better person in parenting, co parenting, or giving someone a tip to take a look see at the greatly anticipated book of flip flops. Flip flops,
Flip flop socks and white V-neck T-shirts.
flip flops, socks, and white V-neck T-shirts.
Indeed.
I know that when this book comes to a store near you, and an Amazon near you, and a Barnes and Nobles near you, and online near you, you're going to get it because, first of all, the title is engrossing, it's captivating, as is Terry Alston's stories. Terry, thank you for being with us today.
Let me say one thing before we
Okay.
sign off. I want to thank you for creating this outlet, for me to be able to talk about this work. I want to thank you and with Gap Moon Publishing,
Well, thank you. We
uh,
thank you.
tremendous company, and I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to working with you and your company for many many books to come.
I think that's a great thing, and we look forward to your truth. It is poignant and it is powerful, and we believe that it will help. It is graphic, yes it is,
Yes,
but then life is graphic, isn't
yes,
it?
yes. It is. It is very
And
graphic.
and so
Life is.
life is very graphic, good, bad, and otherwise.
Hmm.
Life is graphic, and we need to be enlightened. So I
Hmm.
think that this work that you've shared with me thus far, and you'll come back and share with our listening audience, that it is an enlightenment. It is timely.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh,
This work crosses time. It crosses, ethnicities. It crosses uh, socioeconomic levels, all
mm-hmm.
kinds of levels. This work is it will apply to uh, different levels of people, different levels, different places in life. So it's relevant in many many spaces.
And that is true. And it's also has an international bent in it,
Yeah.
audience. So again, thank you, Terry, and
Thank
we'll
you.
be back again quite soon. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.